Welcome to our next installment in our Introduction to Austrian Economics. In this part, we're going to be discussing the market process as a process of competitive cooperation. The Austrian economists have made many contributions, but they have not done so in an intellectual vacuum. They have always been conscious of building upon the important and lasting contributions of the economists and social thinkers who came before them. And in this element that I want to spend some time talking about with us today, this begins really with the classical economists of the late 18th and the early 19th century. Because to talk about the market as a process of cooperative collaboration requires us to briefly remind ourselves what is the core essence and basis of it, and that is, in a nutshell, the division of labor. Now, the importance of division of labor, specialization of tasks, has been understood for well over 2,000 years, and one finds a discussion of it, however in an elementary form, in Plato, the ancient Greek world. But it really began to be formulated in a systematic way in the late 18th century with the French physiocrats, as they were called, and most especially with a group of economists in Great Britain known as the Scottish moral philosophers. And I will try to lay it as a stepping stone for us to discuss the Austrians in the context of one of the most famous of the Scottish philosophers, Adam Smith. Adam Smith begins his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, with a chapter on division of labor. He points out its effectiveness, its greater productivity, its efficiency, and its ability to expand the standards of living in terms of the qualities, varieties, and quantities of goods at people's disposal by men dividing their tasks among each other. He explains a pin factory, and he says if an individual attempted to make pins, a woman's hat pins, for instance, from beginning to end by himself, he'd be lucky if at the end of a day, having to do each step in turn, all by himself, doing one step and setting it aside to move on to the next one, he might be lucky to make 10 pins in one day. But he says that he visited a pin factory and 10 men dividing their activities into 18 different steps and passing them on to each other in sort of like a conveyor belt sequence enabled them in one day with little training and very crude machinery to make up to in one day 48,000 pins. That greater productivity of division of labor and specialization has been a hallmark of our rising standard of living that we take for granted in so much we do. Now, Smith explained this in the context of what economists refer to as absolute advantage. You can produce something that I can't. So clearly, if I want it, I either buy it from you or I don't have it. And reciprocally, there might be something that I can make and produce that you can't. And so you either buy it from me or you must do without it. Or maybe you can make it better than I can or absolutely less expensively than I can. And I reciprocally something I can do better than you. Clearly, there are gains from trade there. But imagine a case in which, as the old song says from the 1950s musical, Annie Get Your Gun, anything you can do, I can do better. If I could do everything better than you, why would I ever have a gain from trade? If I can make my own clothes better and less expensively and a superior quality, and grow my own food and make my own glasses and prepare my own clothes and so on, why should I not live in blissful, self-sufficient isolation? And the division of labor concept was then taken by a series of thinkers in the early 19th century, the most famous one of whom was David Ricardo, to explain the idea of comparative advantage. That is, that a person might be good at many things, but in relative or comparative terms, he might be superior at the manufacture or production of one or a small handful of things. And by focusing attention on what he is relatively better at and buying other things from those who are less efficient than him in other lines of production, the cumulative effect is that he can be better off by saving his time, energy, and resources in focusing on what he's most superior at and letting others do things for him that would otherwise take up his time. And therefore, even those who are less efficient and less productive have places at the table of international and global and domestic trade, so all may gain, whether they're more efficient or less efficient, for the mutual benefit and improvement of all. Now, these concepts had profound influence in the 19th century. These ideas of specialization, division of labor, absolute and comparative advantage, these were the intellectual tools that, to a great extent, helped win the day for the concepts of freeing economies from the stranglehold of government regulations, controls, and restrictions, and to open first a few countries and then eventually the world to free trade, so the world, everyone in every corner of the globe, could mutually participate and benefit from a system of international division of labor. For the Austrians, they saw another deeper element in this, and this was particularly with Ludwig von Mises. He said that David Ricardo's conception of the law of comparative advantage was in fact the law of human association. It is the discovery that there are gains to everyone through interdependency of specialized exchange on absolute or comparative terms that explains why individuals who discover this and see benefits from trading each other's wares with each other soon realize that there are permanent gains from constantly associating, collaborating, interacting with each other, not with an occasional trade, occasional helping hand with a task that's beyond one person's physical capabilities, but to continuously have interdependent relationships of collaboration and association. This is the basis of perpetual and continuous and intensified human cooperation. As Mises said, this is the key for understanding social evolution and social progress. It is the basis of human development from the primitive to the sophisticated standard of living that we take for granted today. Now, at the same time, this was extended in other ways. Now, these are some themes that we'll come up with later when we're talking about the nature of the market and competition in the market. But the Austrians emphasized two things as well. People often think of competition as a zero-sum game. If he wins, another must lose. A dog-eat-dog world where his success means the failure or the beating down of another. Mises, at one point of his famous book on human action, refers to the market and its arena of cooperation as a setting in which people compete through cooperation and cooperate through competition. What happens is that competition becomes the peaceful way for men to associate, not through violence, not through plunder, but through the rivalry of serving each other, through the discovery of what they could do better than someone else who's attempting to gain the business through exchange of their neighbors. And therefore we cooperate to improve everyone's circumstances through the process of competitive excellence. And this competition brings about a collaborative and cooperative arrangement that we call the peaceful and prosperous society of the everyday circumstances that you and I take for granted, where in the direct and immediate sense, violence and plunder is the exception and not the rule. Now, the companion or complementary idea to this is one that Friedrich Hayek developed in the 1960s in a famous essay of his called Competition as a Discovery Procedure. If it is through competition that we cooperate, what is one element of this cooperation? And that is, in our collaborative association, what is it that each person could do better than their neighbor? And Hayek says is that we discover who can do best through the competitive process. But we do this precisely because we do not know ahead of time who could do something better than another. Hayek in this article says, imagine a foot race, a marathon, if you will. If we knew from the beginning who would come in first, who would come in second, who would come in third, their relative place positions and relative times, what would be the point of holding the race? Would it not be redundant and absurd? Why exert the energy and effort when we already know the outcome? Why do we hold the race? We hold the race precisely because we don't know who will do better the next time, even when we have the history, the track record of previous competitions. Oh, this person came in first last time, that one came in second twice. Each race around the course has its unique and discoverable qualities. Different methods of exercising, training, clothes to wear, breathing exercises, mental focus. And in fact, we're also influenced by younger people entering the competition who had not been there before, and the older ones no longer able to stay the course, falling by the wayside. We don't know who will come across the finish line first and second and their relative speeds, other than allowing the people to run the course. What is the ultimate meaning of this competition? I used to run. And if I could say, I used to run 7 miles a day, 7-minute miles. Not marathon, but not too shabby. Every day that I went out, I was competing. Sometimes if I ran in a 10K, I was competing against others. But whether there was someone else nipping at my heels or a few steps ahead of me, there was one person I was competing with each and every time, even when I was out there alone. Me. How can I do today? Can I pick up the pace? Can I do a faster sprint for the last half mile to home? Will I not have the will to do it? I'll slow down. I never knew the answer to that until each day when I ran the course. That's what the market is like. Who can make the better, the cheaper, the newer product? Who can discover the qualities, features, and characteristics that will be most attractive to consumers and which the consumers themselves will not even know they want or desire until someone has thought of it and offered to them on the market in competition with what their rivals are offering in their place? Each person discovers the potentials within themselves. And through discovering that potential within themselves, which only occurs when they have the motive, incentive, and the ability to be able to and to want to try, that all can benefit from others can do through the competition by which we all cooperate for mutual improvement and gain and betterment. This sense of competition is the real meaning of society, a society that escapes from plunder and force, a society that focuses on the effort of improvement of all, even though in the process, as Adam Smith said, each man is pursuing their self-interest and, as if guided by an invisible hand, serving the purposes of others that was no part of their intention. That's what the Austrians build upon. And accept what Adam Smith said long ago. If the market has a set of rules of the game, which are a little older than the Enlightenment of the 18th century, you don't kill, you don't steal, you do not cheat or defraud your neighbor, then the only way I can acquire what you have that I may desire is to persuade you to give it to me by offering you something in exchange that you value more highly than what I ask you to give to me. And then each is set in motion to attempt to do so in that competitive and rivalrous way of discovery that at the end of the day improves all people's circumstances, while all might have to change what they're doing and how they do it under the discovered competitive superiority of others. But at the end of the day, we all improve our circumstances for a better society, a better world of peace rather than plunder. That is the essence and meaning that the Austrians, such as Mises and Hayek, gave to the idea of cooperation through competition, and we compete through a discovery procedure of discovering our own potentials and how we can do compared to our neighbors. Thank you. Until next time.